The NBA salary cap is a complex web of financial restrictions, potential penalties, and ever-evolving calculations with which all 30 teams must comply. But what actually is it, and how does it work? In its simplest terms, the salary cap places a limit on how much each team is allowed to spend on player salaries each season. It is a measure intended to both control costs for clubs and to ensure a degree of parity within the league by preventing teams from stockpiling the best players. Without such spending restrictions, teams with the richest owners or the clubs based in the biggest markets could in theory sign as many of the league's best players as they are willing to pay for. Instead, NBA teams are incentivized to construct a roster of players whose total yearly contract value comes in under the cap, thus ensuring a more even distribution of the game's top stars. This forces the owners and general managers around the league to get creative. They must decide, for instance, whether a championship pursuit is best served by signing 2 or 3 high-priced superstars and then filling out the rest of the roster with rookies or aging veterans on cheap deals, like the Miami Heat team that won 2 championships with LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh as their big 3, or by fostering greater depth surrounding one primary star with multiple high-level contributors, i.e. the Toronto Raptors with Kawhi Leonard. The NBA first introduced a salary cap in the mid-1940s, but the idea was abandoned just after one season. The league operated without any restrictions on salary spending for the next 4 decades before the cap was reinstituted for the 1984-1985 season in an effort to encourage competitive parity. That first season, under the new salary cap, enabled clubs to spend up to $3.6 million on player salaries. For the 2022-2023 season, the cap was set at $123.665 million. That 34-fold increase over the course of the last 3 decades is due to how the salary cap for each season is calculated. The level at which the cap is set is worked out as a proportion of what is termed as the basketball-related income of the 30 franchises. That includes revenue from ticketing, merchandising, broadcasting, and other similar areas. As revenues around the league have skyrocketed since the cap was first introduced, so too has the figure teams are permitted to spend on player salaries. How much of that revenue is apportioned to the salary spending is determined by the NBA's collective bargaining agreement, the contract negotiated and agreed upon periodically by the league and the players' union. The collective bargaining agreement also determines rules around players' contracts, trades, and the draft. In its most recent iteration, ratified in 2016, it was agreed that players should be guaranteed between 49% and 51% of the league's basketball-related income, with the salary cap accounting for 44.74%. The sudden influx of revenue into the league can see the cap limit spike, enabling teams to spend vastly more than the previous season. That is exactly what happened in 2016 when a huge new TV rights deal made it possible for the Golden State Warriors to sign free agent superstar Kevin Durant. Likewise, a period of downturn can see the cap shrink and force teams to tighten their belts. Salary caps are common within top-level U.S. sports. The NBA's salary cap, though, is different to most and can be more complex. For example, the NFL uses what is referred to as a hard cap. This means there is a set, immovable figure under which teams' wage bills must fit every season. The NBA, on the other hand, employs a so-called soft cap. The cap figure is determined each season, but it is less rigid. For those willing to pay an additional premium to do so, there are a set of loopholes, or exceptions, that enable the most ambitious clubs to exceed the cap in pursuit of glory. Some, such as the Larry Bird exception, named after the Boston Celtics legend and 3-time MVP, are intended as measures to limit player movement around the league and encourage continuity. The Bird exception allows teams to exceed the cap in order to re-sign their own players who are due to enter free agency. The disabled players exception is a provision allowing clubs to sign a replacement when one of their players is ruled out for an extended period of time through illness or injury. Other exceptions, such as the mid-level salary exception and the biannual exception, allow teams to bolster their roster depth with players signed on mid to low-level salaries. Clubs are under no obligation to use any of these exceptions to exceed the salary cap, or indeed to spend up to the cap figure on their total player salaries. It is stipulated only that all teams must at least hit the minimum allowable spend of 90% of the cap. Most teams do exceed the cap to some degree, though, and those who wish to go above and beyond in their efforts to challenge for a title become liable to pay a luxury tax. How much luxury tax a team is levied with relates directly to how much they exceed the salary cap by. Just as the cap level is determined each year as a percentage of revenue, so too is the threshold at which clubs exceeding the cap will be liable for luxury tax. Once their wage spending tips over that luxury tax line, they are charged for every additional dollar spent. It begins with a charge of $1.75 for every dollar over the threshold, but the tiered systems can see teams paying as much as $4.75 per dollar if they trigger the highest tier. And there are additional financial penalties for teams who incur a luxury tax bill in consecutive seasons. The Golden State Warriors are a team notoriously willing to spend big in pursuit of winning big. When Steph Curry and co. led them to a championship in 2022, their combined bill for total player salaries and luxury tax came in at a whopping $354 million. Their $107.3 million tax bill set an NBA record, and the league is littered with teams who spend big and have never actually won as big as the Warriors. So, the NBA salary cap is as malleable as it is fluid. It disincentivizes overspending rather than strictly prohibiting it. It might still be possible for teams to buy success, but it would require the deepest of deep pockets.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to the best team of sports writers, reporters, and analysts in the world, offering exclusive stories and unrivaled insight. You can try The Athletic for free for 30 days by clicking the link in the description.